Hello, and welcome to your very first episode of Fisher's Class Notes, Unit 1, Section 1, Episode 1. We're going to start our unit about geography. Before I get started, just remember you do not have to write down every word on here. You can summarize, you can bullet, as long as you just get the notes that you need so you can study and be ready for the quiz. Our vocabulary: continents, migration, the Bering Strait and the Bering Strait land bridge, topography, region, Paleolithic, which means Stone Age, and hunter-gatherers. By the end of this episode, I want you to understand three things. One, studies suggest, or scientific studies suggest, that humans migrated from Asia into the Americas much earlier than we originally thought. We used to think that they only came over the last ice age when the land was exposed to the Bering Strait land bridge about 11,000 to 12,000 years ago. Well, now we think they came over as early as 35,000 years ago, and they started migrating into the Americas. Two, regions are defined by the characteristics of the land, or the physical features of the land. And then three, North Carolina is divided into four regions. You've got the mountains region all the way in the west near Tennessee. That's where the first people started coming from when they migrated. You got the Piedmont where we live, the coastal plain, and the Tidewater. Okay, before we get started, I want to talk about one thing. We are not going to use BC or AD because those are Christian terms, and we are not a single Christian nation. We are a nation of many religions, and we want to celebrate those. So we're instead going to use BCE and CE. BCE stands for before Common Era, instead of using BC or before Christ. And we're going to use CE, Common Era, not AD, which does, by the way, not mean after death. It means, it's Latin for Anno Domini, which means the year of our Lord. So we're going to use BC, E, and CE. For example, this is 2015 CE, or Common Era. So, basic geography, there are 7 continents, although people debate about that. We're going to talk about that in class. We've got Africa, Antarctica, Asia, Australia, Europe, North America, and South America. However, a lot of them connect. For example, North and South America, some people just refer to them as the Americas because right where Panama is, they do connect. And Africa, Asia, and Europe all connect. Many people refer to Europe and Asia as Eurasia, and because Africa connects at the Suez Canal, they might call this Afro-Eurasia, which would be a huge continent. Then you've got Australia and, of course, Antarctica. There are 5 oceans: the Pacific, which of course wraps around because we are a globe, we're not a flat space, the Pacific, the Atlantic, the Arctic Ocean, don't forget that C, it's not Arctic, it's Arctic. You've got the Indian Ocean, and then the Southern Ocean. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about human migration. The earliest scientific evidence puts the earliest humans around us where modern-day Somalia is, and then they eventually made their way about 100,000 years ago to South Africa and to West Africa. Then about 50,000 years ago, one of their earliest treks, 50 to 60,000 years ago, was actually before they even reached Europe. We have evidence that they were in Australia. Then they went into Europe, they went into Asia, and then as early as about 35,000 years ago, they started their way into North and South America. Now they did this, as we talked about in several trips, and we'll get to that more a little bit later. But these were migrants, people who are moving, and it took, hundreds of thousands of years, but they did eventually spread all over the globe. All right, so the earliest people who migrated from Asia across the Bering Strait, we think they did this in many, many, many trips. Of course, we don't know for sure. It's just using best scientific evidence. And the first trips might have been much before the last ice age, and possibly by boat kind of hugging along the shore. So they would have kind of come out of Asia where Siberia is, and past modern-day Alaska and Canada, past Washington and Oregon, California, down to Mexico, and were in southern Chile before the last ice age. At least some scientists are suggesting that now. They were hunter-gatherers, which meant that they chased their food, they hunted their food, and then they gathered things that were edible. So they might have done very, very small-scale farming, but they wouldn't have cleared land in the same way that we do now. This is called the Paleolithic age because they used stone tools. They would sharpen tools to hammer them and to make stone points. They also used bone. And about 14,000 years ago, there's evidence that they started living in what became the state of North Carolina. They would have come from the west through the Appalachian Mountains into North Carolina. And just to show you a map, here are the different routes that they would have taken from Asia across the Bering Strait. So before the last ice age, this blue line, that would have been the first route along the coast, possibly by boat. And then the last groups of people to come about 11 to 12,000 years ago would have come by land when the last ice age, that land was exposed. And so Asia was connected to North and South America. Okay, thanks for watching.